In 1610, François Ravaillac, the man who assassinated King Henry IV of France, sat in a dimly lit interrogation chamber in Paris. The executioner placed a tiny iron device on a wooden table, no bigger than your palm. Ravaillac had already been condemned to be drawn and quartered, torn apart by horses in front of a screaming crowd. Yet when he saw this small object, everything changed. He begged them, skip the spectacle, just use the device. That object was the thumbscrew, and what happened next will change the way you understand human psychology, pain, and confession forever. This small, pocketable device, smaller than your phone, extracted more admissions than any rack, Iron Maiden, or wheel ever could. Before we go any deeper, do me a favor, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and leave a thoughtful comment. It helps us uncover more hidden truths from history, and you won't want to miss the next episode. To understand why the thumbscrew became the weapon of choice, we need to see the world that invented it. From the 1200s through the 1700s, across inquisitions, witch hunts, and enhanced interrogations, Europe obsessed over one thing: confession, not truth. In most courts, a confession was the only way to guarantee a conviction. No confession? No conviction, no matter how guilty the accused appeared. Enter the thumbscrew. At first glance, it looks deceptively simple. An iron frame with 3 or 4 screws that tighten a metal plate. Pocketable, concealable, ready to be deployed in any interrogation room. By the 1600s, European courts faced a dilemma. Public torture was becoming uncomfortable. Citizens questioned the spectacle of crushing skulls or ripping limbs apart in town squares. Authorities needed something cleaner, precise, and terrifying, a method that could shatter the will while leaving the body intact for trial. The thumbscrew delivered exactly that. Records confirm its prevalence. During the Scottish witch trials, the thumbscrew was documented in over 300 cases. In Germany, official records exceed 2,000, not counting undocumented instances. Its power wasn't brute force. It was precision, psychology, and physiological understanding. The human hand is extraordinary. Fingertips contain about 2,500 nerve endings per square inch, more than lips or most erogenous zones. Evolution gave hands extreme sensitivity to feel texture, temperature, and pressure. The inventors of the thumbscrew weaponized that sensitivity. The device applied slow, focused pressure, compressing skin, muscle, and bone into a tiny area. And the pain wasn't random, it was calculated. Manuals like the 1613 German Malus Maleficarum prescribed exact turn counts for the screws, a quarter turn for initial pressure, another quarter after the first cry, a full rotation if silence persisted. Why? Because of temporal summation of pain. Your nervous system stacks pain, each moment amplifying the last. 5 minutes under the thumbscrew doesn't feel 5 times worse than 1 minute. It feels exponentially worse. French court physician Ambroise Paré documented this vividly in 1575. Faces twisted, expressions shifted from stoic to shattered, voices brittle and pleading. Minds unraveled long before bones broke. The thumbscrew made confessions flow without leaving visible scars, leaving the accused standing, coherent enough for trial, yet psychologically broken. So why did Ravaillac, who faced death by dismemberment, beg for this device? Because he instinctively knew it could bend the mind faster than any public execution. This small instrument transformed agony into confession, and in doing so, reshaped centuries of European justice. First, a wince, then sweat dripping down his temples, then what Ravaillac described as a terrible grimace, as though his very soul was being pressed out through his eyes. But here's the truly diabolical part, the detail most historians gloss over. The thumbscrew usually extracted confessions in 8 to 15 minutes. Compare that to the rack, which could take hours, or flogging, which demanded dozens of lashes. In Scotland alone, Privy Council records from the 1590s note a 91% confession rate within a single session. 91%! No other method came close, but the horror didn't end with the fingertips screaming under 2,500 nerve endings per square inch. Something more sinister happened. The mind itself began to crack. The physical agony was only the opening act. The thumbscrew's true weapon was psychological. In 2019, neuroscientists at Stanford conducted a revealing experiment. Participants viewed images of historical torture devices while undergoing fMRI scans. The moment they saw the thumbscrew and read about its use, their anterior cingulate cortex lit up, the same region that reacts during real physical pain. Even imagining the device triggered the brain's pain system. Now place yourself in a 1596 Scottish interrogation room. You are accused of witchcraft. Perhaps by a neighbor over a property dispute, a black cat, or just because you are a solitary woman. The reason doesn't matter. You are here. The interrogator lays the thumbscrew on the table, lets you look at it. He explains in chilling detail how the screws will turn, how pressure will build, how your thumbnail might crack, how pain will spread up your arm. He doesn't touch you yet. He's not cruel. He's smart. Anticipation itself is torture. Court records from over 300 Scottish cases confirm this psychological effect. In 1596, John Fine was accused of witchcraft. He confessed to summoning storms and consorting with the devil after just 1/4 turn of the screws. The physical pain hadn't even fully begun. His mind broke first. Modern psychology calls this anticipatory anxiety amplification. Your brain experiences not only the pain that is happening, but every ounce of suffering you anticipate. The thumbscrew exploited this perfectly. Visible screws turning, methodical pressure, pauses, repeated questions, all designed to break the will before the body is crushed. And the elite understood it. Kings, queens, and nobles knew this was not just physical agony, it was surgical mind-breaking. That's why François Ravaillac, a man who feared nothing, acted the way he did. On May 14, 1610, he assassinated King Henry IV, stabbing him 3 times. He was immediately captured, fully aware of what awaited him. Molten lead poured into wounds, red-hot pincers, limbs tied to horses, pulling in opposite directions until his body tore apart. Yet according to the French National Archives, he remained composed until they brought out the thumbscrew. On May 18th, just 4 days later, interrogators applied the device. The session lasted exactly 11 minutes. 11 minutes of focused, methodical torment. And the king's assassin, who had faced death by dismemberment, finally broke. The court recorder wrote that Ravaillac screamed so loudly his cries echoed up 3 floors through the castle's stone corridors. But listen, what's truly remarkable isn't the volume of his pain. It's what came after those 11 minutes, when the interrogators removed the device and told him they would apply it again the next day. He did something unprecedented. He begged them to execute him immediately. Imagine that, a man facing dismemberment, being torn limb from limb by horses while conscious, found the idea of another session with the thumbscrew more terrifying than death itself. Guards later reported that merely mentioning the device made him tremble and weep like a child. This was not only bodily suffering, it was total psychological annihilation. On May 20th, during his second session, the transcripts record that interrogators barely tightened the screws. They only began to turn, and Ravaillac started confessing to conspiracies that made no logical sense, naming accomplices likely innocent, admitting to plots that never existed. Why? Because his mind had already been broken. Anticipation alone had finished the work the metal began. Modern psychologists label this pattern torture-induced compliance syndrome. Victims become so desperate to avoid repeated exposure to the stimulus that they'll say anything to make it stop. Truth, lies, fantasy, and it all blurs. What matters is silence from the device. But here's a detail most histories omit. There was a way to resist the thumbscrew, a method so effective that when authorities discovered it, they hunted down everyone who knew it. In recorded history, only 3 people are credited with surviving its full effect. The secret came from monasteries thousands of miles away from Europe, and when the Inquisition learned of it, they moved quickly to extinguish it. In the 1640s, Jesuit missionaries traveling through Tibet wrote of Buddhist monks who could sit with their hands in ice water for hours, press needles through their skin without flinching, and, do the accounts say, separate their awareness from bodily pain as if the body belonged to someone else. The technique was called Tonglen, an advanced meditation practice requiring a decade of training. Instead of fighting pain, practitioners leaned into it, observing sensations without judgment, breathing through the agony, visualizing it as transient energy flowing by, never clutching to it. It reads like mysticism, until modern science tested it. In 2012, neuroscientists at Johns Hopkins used fMRI scans on experienced meditators exposed to painful heat. The results were startling. Experienced practitioners showed significantly reduced activity in the brain's pain processing regions. Their minds literally registered less pain than non-meditators under identical stimuli. The technique worked. History turned dark from there. In 1658, 3 Tibetan monks captured during the Goa Inquisition in Portuguese India were interrogated with the thumbscrew. Portuguese records show all 3 refused to confess, even after extended sessions. The interrogators were baffled. The device had almost never failed. Within 2 years, Inquisition offices across Catholic Europe received orders to seek out and target meditation practitioners. Officially, it was about heresy. In reality, it was about neutralizing a method that threatened the entire edifice of torture-based confession. If people could withstand the thumbscrew, the apparatus of fear and compliance would collapse. This Inquisition didn't merely hunt meditators, it adapted. By the early 1700s, a new doctrine emerged, clean torture that broke the will without leaving obvious evidence. Techniques that worked faster, with less time for mental resistance. Oddly, the thumbscrew itself was later outlawed. In England in 1781, in Prussia in 1754, and in Bavaria in 1816, not because courts had discovered compassion, but because crushed fingers and visible scars offered defendants proof they could show in court. The concept, however, survived. Isolation cells, sleep deprivation, stress positions, water-based methods. Every modern enhanced interrogation technique carries the same principle the thumbscrew pioneered: precision psychological destruction that leaves no visible trace. The legacy of the thumbscrew didn't die with the device itself. Its philosophy, breaking the mind while leaving the body superficially intact, became a blueprint for psychological control across centuries. Isolation chambers, sleep deprivation, stress positions, and subtle manipulations. These are the modern echoes of that small iron device. History shows us that you don't need visible scars to destroy a person. All you need is fear, anticipation, and the perception of inescapable control. Think about it. The Inquisition proved something chilling. Systems of power can maintain legitimacy while systematically crushing individuals. Confessions appear voluntary, records suggest due process, yet generations are shaped by fear and compliance. The thumbscrew was not merely a tool of punishment, it was a weapon of social engineering, a methodical destruction of autonomy and will. And here's the haunting truth. These patterns aren't extinct. Even today, authoritarian systems around the world employ invisible coercion. People disappear into detention facilities, subjected to interrogations where pain is inflicted silently, confessions extracted under duress, families disrupted, and reputations ruined, often with no evidence left behind. The lesson isn't that we live in a medieval Inquisition. The lesson is about recognizing invisible violence, understanding how systems manipulate compliance, and believing the accounts of those who survive it. Witnessing matters. Documentation matters. Speaking out matters. That awareness is the first step to preventing history from repeating itself. So I want you to reflect and share safely. What silent systems of control exist in your country today? What forms of violence leave no visible scars, yet shape lives? What institutions preserve the appearance of legitimacy while systematically destroying specific populations? Observing and discussing these patterns is how societies protect themselves. If this video made you think, angry or curious, subscribe. Because next week we dive into the medieval abortion underground, the hidden network of women who preserved forbidden medical knowledge, risking everything to keep female autonomy alive. This is a story of resistance, ingenuity, and courage you won't want to miss. Remember, history isn't just the past. It's the map to understanding patterns before they strike again. And the thumbscrew? It's a reminder that the mind can be more fragile than the flesh, and fear, even invisible fear, can change the course of generations.